Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Rasmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Ishvaro Guratmeti Murti Veda Vibhagine Vyomabda Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Sava Vedanta Sedanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanantam Satguru Pranatosh Maham Om Shanti 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 Om Namaste and we begin our Q&A as a follow-up of our Viveka Sudhamani class, but of course it's open to any Vedantic question.
Yeah, I just, when we talk about consciousness and discuss it, how is that not objectifying it? So, if we talk about consciousness and we put language to it, we put words to it, then does that turn it into an object? And how do I deal with that? And to say it's not an object, it's a subject.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Consciousness is so subtle. It is subtler than space. So when we think of space, we know it is the most subtle of all the elements. So when we think of space, what do we see, David? When we think of space, what do we see? Do we see space? Yes and no.
And we see, we see a gap between objects, but yeah.
Yeah, so we don't really see space, but we understand space as the container in which objects appear, you understand? So it's something that is a byproduct of Maya, and it is defined by its attributes, its qualities among some, is the quality or property of accommodating all other elements that appear within itself. And we have a lot of experiments in physics that proves to us that there is such a thing as space as well, although space cannot be seen by our physical eyes. Space cannot be heard as we can hear the air, So we cannot feel the space because the space is too subtle. The air, we can touch the air. We can feel that there is certain resistance, there is a certain mass through the air. So this space is the most subtle of all objects. And it's often, it is presented as an analogy to consciousness because it pervades everything. It penetrates and it pervades everything, permeates and pervades everything. Everything depends on the space. The space is free and independent of all other elements. But yet we know that space is a product of Maya because it has attributes, qualities, properties, and furthermore, space is only all-pervasive as long as the universe is projected into manifestation. When the universe projects the space in all other objects, they disappear into what we call potential, seed state as a potential. So when we talk about space, we have a hard time to see, but we can easily conceptualize the space. When we think about consciousness, the word consciousness, so what does come to our mind? Because objectively, the most subtle thing that can come to our mind is space. You understand? Which is the first of all elements. And then everything else can come into existence out of space. But when we think of consciousness, so can we conceptualize it objectively and have, a clear conception of consciousness as something that can be objectively defined. So we're experimenting here. So when we think of consciousness, can we conceptualize it objectively and define it objectively? So we can't. We can't. How can we define consciousness? You understand? We can define the mind, right? When we say, think of the word, think of mind, think the thought mind and see, what comes to us as mind. So immediately we can conceptualize and perceive this object of conceptualization called the mind. We can see by what the thoughts and the emotions and the determinations somehow that floating in my mind. We can call, oh yeah, mind. I know what the mind is. Oh, it's very subtle. Yes, it's so subtle that people do not even consider psychology a science because it's so subtle. How can we objectify the mind and its tendencies, its emotions, and make a science out of it? But it is tangible enough because we know that our mind is there, most of the time, giving us a little bit of a hard time with it, it is thoughts and stories and wants and fears and so on. So we know the mind is subtle. It cannot be perceived by the eyes, but we have a sense of it objectively. We have a sense of space, but when we think about consciousness, so if we are free from the tendency of superimpose the mind on consciousness and say that, oh yes, consciousness, I know consciousness is the mind. No. When we come to Vedanta, we come to do this discrimination between consciousness and the mind. It's relatively easy to see the mind objectively, but how can we see consciousness objectively? Even if we use words to define its nature, such as Satchitananda, existence. When we talk in terms of existence, so what comes to our mind when we talk about existence? Because it's the isness of everything, but it's so subtle that it almost goes into total vagueness, abstraction, or philosophy, when we talk in terms of existence, when we begin analyzing existence, which is the theme of this text written by Shankaracharya, now Vidyaranya Swami, called Panchadasi. It's the analysis on existence, inquiry into existence, So when we talk about consciousness, we know what's consciousness. It's existence. It is knowingness or knowledge or consciousness, pure knowledge. Okay, it's existence, it's knowledge, and it is also ananta, limitless, because there is only consciousness, the only reality, we mean to say. So when we use those three words, Sat Chitananda, isness, knowledge, and limitlessness, still we are not really giving much to the mind to objectify and to get a grasp of what is this consciousness. Yeah, now I understand. Because these are not attributes of Brahman. This is not the attributes of what we are. These are our very nature. It's the very nature of Brahman. Existence, it is the isness of everything. It is knowledge, consciousness, and it is of the nature of one without a second, because it's the only reality. Everything else is projected on the screen of this conscious, limitless existence. So what is the point there? So when we talk about consciousness, so can we really see it as an object, or the only way we can know consciousness consciousness is by understanding that I am that. I am that consciousness. Consciousness can only be known as our very, very nature. You understand the nature of the subject, witnessing, non-experience principle that shines in the intellect and makes the intellect a living being who knows and experiences the world of object. Are you with me, David?
Yeah, I'm with you. But we're still talking about it. I don't know, we're still talking about it and trying to understand it. And
yeah. And how can we talk about something that is not other than myself, and it's not my mind, it's not my body, it's not my causal body, it's the real I. We talk about that, but we can say very little about that. Because if something is not colored by the energies, the qualities, if someone is not constituted by a lot of developments that brings about qualities and properties, there is very little we can talk about. That's why the Upanishads, the end of the Vedas, is very comprised. There is not much we can say, there are few statements that they sound very simple. They sound like abstract and almost contradictory, but it's the only thing we can say about that, that is Satchitananda, and fundamentally everything is this consciousness. Everything which is colored by these gunas, by these properties of the gunas, is just a superimposition, it's just a projection. And the only reality is this consciousness, the principle, this conscious existence in which these things come, they are illumined, they are known, experienced, they are revealed, they are illumined, they are revealed, they are known, they are experienced. Everything is happening in your mind, and in your mind is not apart from consciousness. Your mind changes with the contact with every knowing object, every experiencing object. Mind is going to react, respond to every object according to its vasana. But this consciousness, Dave, is what is there all the time, just revealing, and illumining, revealing, and knowing and experience whatsoever comes into its view, into its field of perception. Okay? So this consciousness is the only reality. The mind, which is an object, a byproduct of meat, and everything that is perceived through this mind, this agent, is changing, and it's not always present. It's time bound and so on. They are just appearances in consciousness. And we are not far from this consciousness. Our trouble is only how to separate or to understand that I'm not the mind, I'm not the intellect. The intellect is the instrument, but I am this light of consciousness. And this light it shines into the intellect and allows the intellect to know what it knows, to know what it does not know, to experience things, to learn more things, and so on. Is the subjective, witnessing, non-experiencing principle. The intellect becomes the subject experiencing principle, agent. Okay? Consciousness is the non-experiencing subject, absolute principle that infuse the intellect with knowingness, with the ability to know, and the intellect becomes the agent, the person, the entity, It is an experience knowing entity, the intellect, but consciousness is not an experiencing entity. You understand the subtlety, David?
Oh, I, it's very subtle, and no matter how I think about it, I just feel like I just end up like so close, but I just just I can't get there. And then as soon as I start thinking that way, it's not someplace I'm trying to get to,
Yeah.
and because I'm already there.
Yeah.
So I just it's I hear what you're saying, and this consciousness is just the nature, the core of who we are, which is great, um, and um, and so I think it's all right then, to the extent that I can get it, that this jiva can understand it, then then that's fine. I think then it's a but it's very different.
Yeah, the difficulty, David, is that our minds, our intellect, they have this old tendency. It's a vasana to look for things, outside, because all sense organs, they are extrovert towards the field of objects, the dense gross objects and the subtle objects. We are always trying. When we come to see, I want to realize consciousness, the self, and I heard that it's my very own, my very nature, my very identity, and so on. And I want to really understand this famous Brahman, this famous consciousness. And the mind, because of this old tendency, okay, of extroverting and looking for things as an object somewhere outside of itself, okay? So this tendency is what almost 100% of the case delays our recognition of what consciousness really is. Because as long as we keep looking for it as if it's something other than myself, I will be misled and I will be feeling the same way you described. Well, it's so close. I get it, so close, but there is something missing here. You understand? So what's missing is that we need to come to a point that this nature, this old vasana, this tendency to project consciousness as something that I can see and perceive, intellectually, or experientially, or emotionally. So we need to point to understand, no, I mean, it's not like trying to see it through the mind objectively. The mind has somehow to understand the most famous statements of the Upanishads, which is Tatvamasi, I am this consciousness. You understand? The mind has to come to a point that, forget it, I'm trying to find it outside there. I am this consciousness. You understand? I am Brahman. Aham Brahma is me. Oh my God, I'm looking for Brahman for how long? And now I realize, I am this Brahman, So this is a very subtle shift. And when this happens, one almost invariably feels like, oh my God, how could I have missed it before? And we miss it because of this extroversion tendency of the mind, you understand? We want to see, to find consciousness. We heard that we are consciousness. Now we know I'm looking for myself. And then we still keep looking for ourselves somewhere else, because I'm still trying to understand it as something other than myself. Then we need to go back and redefine ourselves again. So what am I? If I am the mind, and then I have a point, I am the mind, I am the intellect, okay? And I'm looking for consciousness, and this is the trouble. I define myself as the mind, as the intellect, and now I want to find consciousness. But we used to say, yes, you are the mind, you are the intellect. Now take the mind and turn it upon its source, which was used to be a very, very difficult exercise. I've tried to turn the mind upon its source, you know? So Vedanta is much sophisticated. It's going to present a lot of beautiful logical arguments to prove to the inquirer that the mind is consciousness. You understand? The mind, the jiva, is consciousness. Is the consciousness reflect in its very intellect. Is consciousness. It is reflect consciousness. It's a shining consciousness. It is this sentience that we experience, which is consciousness. And this sentience that we experience is not the mind, the ego, the intellect. Those are just thoughts that occur within consciousness. You understand? So we come to a point that we say, okay, I will never find it there. And now I understand why I'm not being able to find it out there. Because I am not the mind, I am consciousness itself. I will never find consciousness because consciousness is what I am. You understand? How am I going to find myself out there if consciousness is what I am? So we need to come to the point to really do all these discriminations, and then we refuse all these upadhis, all these different levels of human experience by which I define, I identify, and so on, and I construct this sense of identity. Understand? So we need to come to a point that understand, yes, I'm not the mind. I have rejected that. I'm not. So therefore, I want to look for consciousness. So now how am I going to look for consciousness? If I am consciousness, I'm not the mind. I did the Viveka, I did all these discriminations over the years. Now I know I'm consciousness. So now I want to go still, I'm really insistent. I want to say, I know, I accept I am consciousness, but now I want to find consciousness. So now, how are you going to find yourself if you are already yourself? That is the irony, you know. I am the seeker, but the seeker and the sought, you know, is one and the same. So how long the seeker is going to be, keep seeking for himself or for herself, if he is exactly what he's seeking for, what he's looking for, searching for. So it boils down to this fundamental mistake, which is this mistaken identity with the body-mind complex. This fundamental misidentification with the body-mind as the body-mind. If we take ourselves to be the body-mind, and then we're going to keep looking for consciousness, it's going to end only when we really accept that we are consciousness, therefore there is nothing to search for anymore. We think that this Vedanta sometimes is repetitive, but we keep doing this work, and we keep coming closer and closer to this final click of understanding, which is the most simple and the most obvious thing, which does not require any bright, intelligent intellect. Once we go through most of the questions and doubts, you know, and then you see like, oh my God. One does not need to be a genius to understand that I am what I'm looking for. I am just consciousness. Do you know why we want to establish our identity as consciousness, David? I'm asking you now, why it's so important for us to establish our identity as consciousness?
Well, because it's the only way to eliminate suffering, to avoid suffering.
And why? Why we eliminate suffering by determining and discovering and accepting our identity as consciousness?
because we realize that what suffering is suffering occurs because of time and space. I mean, it exists because we're identifying with the body and mind. And if when we disassociate or discern the difference, then the suffering only impacts the apparent reality. It doesn't impact consciousness. And and if I'm truly consciousness, then that's it. To me, it gets into I don't know. The word that comes to my mind is faith, um, because even Shraddha sounds to me like it's still a mythia. Like have faith, faith and with inquiry. That still sounds that still doesn't sound like I'm there, or it's like you have to make that leap. And but then as soon as I talk about a leap, then it's a journey again. Then I'm going from one place to another, because that's what leaping is. But if I dissolve, it's the only thing I can resolve. The only thing that really comes to my mind is dissolving, like a wave dissolves into the ocean. It's the same type of thing. It's
Yeah.
this jiva, this body and mind needs to, it dissolves into consciousness, and it doesn't, it only exists in apparent reality. It doesn't exist within consciousness.
Yeah, this dissolve is a word that sometimes we even use, but it would be more like the firm belief that I am the body-mind construct, the body-mind complex dissolves into the fact that I am consciousness, the superimposition, the mistaken belief that I am the body and the mind dissolves, and then I realize my true nature identity as the light of consciousness. You understand? So, but I was asking you that because the only way for us to come out of what we call samsara, this cycle of birth and so on, and suffering, which why the suffering is part of this samsaric human experience is because of this firm belief that I am the body, I am the mind, and my body, mind, they are stuffed, filled with desires and fears. And all of these desires and aversions, they serve the purpose to help me to get happiness out there and remove the sense of inadequacy and limitation, which is inherent to every and all body-mind complex. So the only way out of this suffering that you mentioned is to shift your understanding about ourselves, about yourself, from the body-mind to consciousness. Why? Because consciousness is ananta. It's the only principle in our human experience that is free of limitations. You understand? It's not bound by time, it's not bound by space, it's not bound by any qualities and properties, it's not defined. Okay? So the only way for us to resolve this problem is shifting our identity from the body-mind to the I am consciousness, I am that consciousness, I am that Brahman, right? So we need to keep working on discriminating, and it gets subtler and subtler and subtler as we grow, as we, and then we keep discriminating our true nature as consciousness from all these 5 sheets, all these different experiences we have, you understand? The upadis, until we have this conviction, this firm conviction about what the scriptures tell us. So in the beginning, this we are trapped by what the scripture says, although we are not fully convinced. We are not fully convinced in the beginning. We're still like, but it sounds a bit strange, and how can I not be my body? How can I not be my mind? And then gradually, as we keep working, following the logic as presented by the Upanishads again and again, you understand, with the help of a Sangha, with the help of a teacher, and then this firm, this clarity and conviction and trust in the statements of the Upanishad start growing, and you start thinking, "Woo! Now I'm getting it. Now I'm developing this certainty, this clarity, and this conviction, this certainty. Yes, I am this consciousness, and I start enjoying this sense of freedom as consciousness. So the more our doubts are erased or removed, the more our conviction grows, And that means the more our confidence in the teachings of the Upanishads grow as well. So this confidence has to grow. And then we have what we call mumukshutva, a full confidence, a full trust, and a full effort and desire to really go all the way until I'm clear about what I am.
Okay. And so until you have the full trust, the mumiksha, then just keep on inquiring, right? Just
You keep doing that.
keep inquiring,
Yeah.
studying, and practice. Not practice, but I don't mean it that way. But I mean study or reflect or nididhyasana. What that you until that full trust. I mean,
we don't trust things. We don't trust things that we do not know. Vedanta never asks for any inquirer to present a blind trust, So we have trust and confidence only to the extent that we know and we value something. So this shraddha, it grows as we get in contact with these teachings and we see that it works. You understand? And then we trust more. And then it works more, and then we trust more. We cannot hold our trust for too long if we are not being benefited by these teachings, How long? A lot of people drops off after some time, Why? Oh, no, I already did 6 months, 1 year, and I feel like I'm not really being transformed by it. I haven't seen much benefit. You understand? So I just go and I do what I was doing before. I'm not going to inquire. I'm going to do things to have some good experience rather than study and contemplate so that I can get a better understanding of what I am. So we only develop this trust to the extent, to the degree that we can enjoy the benefits and say, oh, it's working. Yes, give me more. It's working. Give me more. Right?
well, and so we're exactly where we should be right now with the Viveka Chudamani.
Yeah, and I'm positive that that's your case. So you want more Vedanta because you're seeing that Vedanta works.
It works. Yeah, that works. And so okay. Thank you.
You're most welcome.
All I want for Christmas is full trust.
Arlindo.
Oi. Hello, Claudio.
Yeah, hello. You had just said that we cannot conceptualize consciousness, but we can talk about consciousness because we know that the nature of consciousness is Sat Chitananda. So in a way, it is a conceptualization, maybe subtle, but it is or not.
Yeah. Well, we say that consciousness cannot be known by the mind, by the intellect, and by the sense organs. We need a different means of knowledge for that. I need a different pramana for that, because the intellect, the mind, the intellect, because it cannot really be conceptualized, the sense organs cannot perceive it, you know, the mental, emotional aspect of ours. We say, okay, no, you cannot get it for that, but you can feel it, feel the consciousness, feel consciousness. There are a lot of people out there trying to feel consciousness, you know. No, the mind cannot feel it, the intellect cannot conceptualize it, and the sense organs cannot perceive it, okay? But the scripture says that consciousness can be known. You understand? Not be known this and this and this way, but it can be known, but it requires a different means of knowledge, a different pramana, a very unique one. And these pramana are the scriptures of the Upanishads, you know, the final statements. These pramana, this large present by our Mahatmas, our gurus, and our the pillars in our sampradaya, such as Shankara and Viveka and Vidyaranya and among others. So this pramana, this unfoldment of the statements of the Upanishad is the only way to know
consciousness.
To know consciousness. And how are you going to know consciousness? How are you going to know it? If you already are consciousness, you have always been consciousness. There is nothing other than consciousness, and you cannot exclude yourself from consciousness. So how are you going to know it? I mean, the pramana is here. The means of knowledge is here. And then you apply it to your mind, and how are you going to know that? If you already are consciousness, you're going to only know it by removing the wrong notions you have about yourself. So there is a pramana, a means of knowledge to know consciousness, which is a totally unique one. Because it cannot say consciousness is this, consciousness is that. It can only say, hey, consciousness is none of these experience you have. Consciousness is not like, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this, until you come to a point after you have been rejecting everything. It comes to a point that you are subtle enough to understand that you are that. It reveals your true nature by removing all these wrong notions about that we have about ourselves. So talk about it, but in fact, we talk very little about consciousness except to say Sat Chitananda. All the rest is just analyzing our experience, re-examining our experience to determine that we are none of these experience, we are none of these things that we perceive. Even the most beautiful, subtle objects, such as spiritual, mystical experience, none of that is consciousness, because you are the consciousness, the light that illumines all kind of subtle, beautiful objects. You understand? So consciousness can be known, can only be known as my very, very self, my very, very nature. And for that, I need this body of knowledge that is going to reveal consciousness in an indirect manner. I like to say that. And I have to say that is my take. I have never seen it written anywhere. I like to say that self-knowledge is a direct and immediate knowledge, because it's you understand your very true nature, your very essential nature, fundamental nature. There's nothing between you and your object of knowledge. You are the knower and you are the object of knowledge, meaning to say that is only you, okay? But how we go about to reveal the nature of the jiva as consciousness? We go about indirectly by removing the wrong notions we have about what we are. A lot of people in the spiritual world, the so-called the direct path guys, they just want to say you are consciousness and just get over it. There's nothing much you need to do. You don't need to do anything. Why are you going to do something if you're already consciousness and you want to know who you are? You are consciousness. Forget it. But it never really convinced anybody. Why? Because all these wrong notions that we have about ourselves, they were never addressed. They remains there, undermining those statements of these direct path people. They're going to tell to everybody with a lot of power, your consciousness, there is only consciousness, and blah, 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 blah. But yet, you are only going to realize it to the degree that you cancel those intellectual, hardwired notions, such as I am the body, I am the mind, I am my life history, my memories, and so on and so on and so on. So Upanishad does not say much about consciousness. It says a lot about the not self, and we need to destroy the identification of the jiva with the not self until it remains clear and firmly convinced that he is the only self there is, which is consciousness, existence.
Are you kind of saying like direct knowledge, like, and the word I've heard is darshan. That is just yet another, a veil. It's a distraction. It's temporary. So to seek direct knowledge through some other means is just yet another way for the body-mind complex to or for Mithya to take over. So it's just not going to work.
I don't think I understood your objection here, but it is you believe that direct knowledge is a dualistic knowledge. Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, if we're pursuing direct knowledge, which I just had this experience where somebody just really wanted
I
to.
understood. You talk about the direct path guys. Okay, I think I understand.
Yeah, that direct. Yeah. Darshan, and I'm going to lay hands on you, right? I'm going to lay hands, and you're going to get it, and that's just not gonna last. So it might happen for a little bit. You might get a glimpse. You might feel something, but it's not going to last. And so what we're talking about is something that's going to last.
Yeah, and that is what we call a paroksha jnana, which is a direct and immediate self-knowledge. We can have an indirect self-knowledge. We can study everything about the self, and then we know everything about the self, even if it's mostly in reference to the not self. We say, what's the self? It's not this, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this. Oh, I know so much about the self, but it's all in reference to the not self. Fair enough, I'm learning more and more about the self. Okay? But direct and immediate knowledge is not indirect knowledge. I begin to understand what's the self. The direct and immediate self-knowledge is I am the self. Understand? You remember Ramji saying again and again, claim, claim, claim. The whole process of spirituality is to begin to understand what is this self, what is this consciousness, and then we can do a lot of work to try to understand what it is. But the final leap, the final step is to claim, I am Brahman, I am consciousness, I am the self, I am just Brahman. I am this consciousness, I'm not these thoughts, I'm not the mind, I'm not the I thought. Now I am the consciousness, shines in the intellect to produce the I thought. You understand? So this is the direct knowledge. And the people in the direct path, they try to produce that. They may have it, they may not have it, we will never know, these gurus, but they try to present that or to produce that direct self-knowledge without presenting a body of knowledge that is going to address the firm belief that I am the not self, that I am my mind, my body, my experience, my sensations, my history, and so on. So we need to go about knocking off all these wrong notions about what we believe it to be. You understand? So all of this is indirect, is a process of indirect self-knowledge, because I'm learning about the self, and I'm learning even about understanding that all of this is the not self, and I'm still searching for the self, okay? And I'm still learning to the self in reference to the not self. But comes a point that this aham brahmasmi, I am Brahman, I am consciousness, I am the self, it takes place. Once this vision, this understanding is seen through, it's clear, and then is what we call a parokshayana. It's a knowledge which is free from any obstruction, and it's not indirect, because I am Brahman. There is no question of the knower and an object of knowledge, because I am that. I'm no longer looking for that somewhere else other than myself. There is only I, consciousness, and I am consciousness, and everything is consciousness. So this is the true, direct, immediate knowledge, which is not subject to doubt. It's not subject to forgiveness once it's seen through. It's not subject to error, because once you know who you are as consciousness, you cannot confuse yourself with the mind anymore. You understand? The mind may come here and there and appears as an object, but again and again you are there clear, discriminate, I'm not the mind. You understand? So this is the direct, immediate aparokshayana that the Upanishads refer, that comes about by understanding the not self and breaking the identification, the apparent identification of the self with the not self. So when we do the discrimination, a time comes that we need to claim. We need to claim. And even if at the beginning it feels a little fake, we need to fake until we make it, like Ramji likes to put. So fake until you make it does not mean that you are trying to tell everybody that, oh, I am the self, I'm the self. No, you're going to confront those notions, that self-limiting notions that appear in your mind, those doubts that say, no, I am the body, I am the mind, that say, no, aham brahmasmi, aham brahmasmi. It's an inner work of faking until I make it, until it's clear. You understand? I got to that point long before I met Vedanta and Ramji, and long before the self-recognition took place in my mind, in my intellect, when I was a devotee of Nisargadatta Maharaj and Ramana and Papaji. So I developed a certain conviction that I am consciousness, I am consciousness, I am consciousness. And every time that the mind would push me around and I would behave like the body mind, and then I would get myself into conflicting karma. And then people would tell me, oh, what are you doing, man? You would say that you're spiritual, right? Look how you are behaving, I would tell to myself and sometimes to others, hey, make no mistake, I am consciousness and I don't give up. Even if there are some, contradiction between what I say and what I do, make no mistake, I am consciousness. Doesn't matter how many times I fall on my knees and I get myself into trouble, but I don't let go of this conviction that is growing inside of myself. I am consciousness. This is faking until we are fully convinced,
Which to me is like having the faith, to wait until it subtly grows, I guess.
Yeah, it is a sort of confidence and trust in the scriptures and caring, but at the same time, it is a growing. It's more than a confidence. It begins being like a growing certainty that the scriptures are right. I still have some doubts. I still have some resistance. I'm not really fully claiming my true nature, but there is already a certain, growing conviction that the scriptures may be really right, you know, and then we need to really hold on to that initial trust and conviction, you know, that I am consciousness, you know, and more we develop this certainty, this growing certainty, and this trust, this confidence in the scripture, more, you know, will feel this sense of freedom that comes from this understanding, you know. It's not blind faith, it is the faith that it's already conditioned by our self-knowledge, our growing self-knowledge, our growing understanding that what the scriptures say may be indeed the truth. You understand this, the subtle distinction, Karen?
Yes, I do. Mhm.
Good.
And I have absolute faith and trust in the scriptures, and I even claim that I am that pure consciousness. And yet, I still associate with my mind and my feelings from time to time. And I'm thinking perhaps the best path for me now would be to go back and look at the qualifications and re-go over the qualifications, and actually put my spiritual energy in that direction at the moment, because I absolutely have complete faith in the teachings.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I understand you say.
Is this the?
I understand you say that you have faith in the teachings, you have faith in the final statements of consciousness, but you use the word associate. I understand you say, but I still identify with my mind, right? And my emotions and my vasanas and so on. You identify. That's what you meant to say by association with the mind and the body, right?
Yes, right.
Because we are all associate to the body and the mind, apparently associate, you know. We jivas, we are the byproduct of this apparent association of consciousness with Maya and with the three bodies. Okay, so these associations brings about this jiva atma. You say that you as jiva atma, you know that you are paramatma, but here and there, this knowledge, it fades, and you find yourself behaving totally identified as the jiva, and not the jiva atma, as the body mind complex, right? Is that what you said?
That's what I said, Arlindo. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the process. This is the case, you know, until this self-knowledge is hard and fast, as we say, you know, until it's really clear, until it's a doubt-free self-knowledge. And then it no longer, it depends on that element called trust in the scriptures, because now it's direct knowledge. I know that the scriptures are saying the truth, so I don't need to trust the scriptures anymore. We trust it until we have the knowledge, and that knowledge no longer requires this trust, this shraddha, okay? So this shraddha in the beginning is very important, and it's a growing shraddha, it's a growing confidence, and with this growing confidence, this growing self-knowledge, you know, this self-knowledge is going to become more and more firm, more and more solid, and more doubtless knowledge, you know. They grow together, your shraddha, your trust, and then the self-knowledge. And then when the self-knowledge is clear, and then you no longer require any trust, you know, you're going to be grateful to the scriptures, but you're not going to need any more trust because the trust in the scripture has paid dividends. You understand? Now you are saying like, what shall I do? You know, we say that the greatest purifier, the greatest developer of mental, intellectual, emotional qualities or qualifications is jnana. Jnana is the greatest purifier of the mind. So you can do whatsoever you do. My suggestion is that you just take advantage of the entire, you know, how you say, the lack, the entire, how you say, lack? All teachings of Vedanta.
Sorry, I'm not quite clear what you're trying
Yeah,
to
yeah.
say.
Rather than doing one thing or
Okay, yeah, the
another,
entire
be
teachings, yeah.
be a karma yogi, be a upasana yogi, okay, and be an inquirer into the jnana yoga of the Vedanta. Do all the three. You understand? Because ultimately, jnana yoga is the greatest purifier of the mind. But as we know, karma yoga is integral part of our life, and we need to develop that sort of knowledge and attitude that converts what we do into sadhana. And this sadhana is going to keep helping us to develop these qualifications. So our sadhana here has to I would say, how to take in all of these different aspects of Vedanta, the karma, the dharma yoga. I'm bringing the upasana yoga because I know you come from this background of meditation. If you like to do asanas, because it helps to relax the body-mind complex, and then a more relaxed body-mind complex assimilates and retains better this self-knowledge, you understand? And keep doing the work we are doing here, for example, you know, doing the final discrimination between the self and the not self, between Satya and Mithya, between the subject and all objects that appear within itself. So that's my suggestion. So just stay focused on karma, dharma, upasana, and jnana yoga all together, because you have enough qualifications and maturity, to my understanding, to just keep doing it, you know, and making use of jnana, of inquiry, because it's the greatest purifier of the mind. Okay? Anything,
Okay.
Mark?
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. No, really, when you were saying that, I was just thinking, okay, so basically spiritualize every single aspect of life, you know.
Of course.
Knowing that every aspect of life is consciousness. So spiritualize everything from the moment I wake up to the very last thing.
It is our spiritual sadhana, you know, to spiritualize every aspect of our life. I like that definition. So Lynn is fully agreement. And
okay, thanks, Ananda.
we have a lot of people are going back to check the oven to see how the turkey is doing. We have lost David and Karen. Does anybody else have anything to say?
I just want to say thank you. It's beautiful satsang, and seems to me what we've been talking about is the heart of nididhyasana. Just that single focus.
Yeah.
Staying with scriptures.
Yeah.
Thank God for satsang, you know.
Yeah.
The whole thing, just steady on the case, walk the talk, go for it.
Wonderful.
Claim
yeah.
it, as you say.
Claim it, yeah. I love this. I love this deep satsang. Those are my favorites, you know, to really go to the core. Yeah. Okay. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, Lord Ishwara. Thank you, everybody. And we meet again soon, next Monday. A good Thanksgiving to everybody in the States, and a good spaghetti for Claudio. And for Mark, I don't know what you're going to have tomorrow for breakfast, Mark.
I'm not sure yet, Arlindo. Probably cornflakes and almonds and yogurt and honey.
Okay, okay,
I'm not sure yet.
That's your Thanksgiving meal tomorrow. Sounds good. Okie dokie. Love, love.
Yeah.
See you soon again. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Thanks.